This is Books for Breakfast, a podcast where we talk about books and writing. I'm Enda Wiley.
And I'm Peter Sirr.
And you're all very welcome to this morning's show. Today, I'll be talking to Louise Kennedy, whose debut short story collection, The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac, has just been published by Bloomsbury, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Louise.
And our Toaster Challenge guest is Penelope Shuttle, whose new collection of poetry, Leoness, has just been published by Blood Axe Books.
So, the coffee's made.
The toast is on.
And the books are on the table. Outstanding, luminous, punchy, touching, funny, beautifully crafted are just some of the words that writers such as Joseph O'Connor, Sinead Gleeson, Kevin Barry have justifiably used recently to describe the debut short story collection by our next guest. Can I say guest again, Peter? By our next guest. Louise Kennedy grew up in Hollywood, County Down, and is now living in Sligo. Before starting to write, she worked as a chef for many years, but once she began to write, there was no stopping her, and her stories have been published in The Tangerine, The Stinging Fly, Banshee, and Winter Papers, and Ambit. She was shortlisted not once but twice for Sunday Times Audible Short Story Award in both 2019 and 2020, and Louise has also written for The Guardian, The Irish Times, BBC Radio 4, and RTE Radio 1. So we're delighted to have Louise here to talk to us about her collection. The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac, just out from Bloomsbury. Louise, you're really welcome to our breakfast this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Louise. I'm sure you're exhausted from all the publicity you've been doing for this wonderful book. So we're really grateful that you've come in this morning.
Thanks, William.
To start off with, I think it's going to be a great beginning, actually, to the podcast, because you're going to read the opening section of the title story, The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac. So, Louise, if you want to lead us into that, that would be great.
So this is, I guess it's the first page of the book. So this story is set on a ghost estate. I suppose it's about legacy kind of the Celtic tiger. So it's about a woman who's been basically left with this sort of crumbling cul-de-sac of houses. So I'll start to read. The dereliction was almost beautiful, the houses dark against the mauve dawn, pools of buff-coloured water glinting briefly as a passing car took the last bend before town. Number 7 was starting to look like the other units, the lawn stringy with brown weeds. The footpath petered out and Sarah landed hard in a puddle, picking her way over broken masonry and loops of cable until she reached the end of the cul-de-sac. The noise was coming from the show house. It looked even worse inside than out. Clots of dung littered the travertine floor. All the doors had been taken, including the front one, which only seemed to emphasize how small the rooms were. The donkey was in the living room by the cavity in the chimney breast where the granite fireplace had been. It was plump and skittish, pastiles of dried sleep at the corners of its eyes. Sarah whispered to it, cajoled, pleaded. She tried shooing it, spreading her arms to drive it out to the hallway. It pawed and snattered, and a flume of shit hit the wall behind it. She'd have to go and get her neighbour. She left the estate and started up the steep lane towards Mattie Feeney's house. She had gone there once with Davy when the old man's wife died. Away from the main road, the light was different. It was hard to see. The brambles that coiled back over the dry stone walls nicked her hands. She walked faster, almost trotting, her Wellingtons kicking up small rocks and squeaking over the tranche of grass that ran the centre of the lane. She was breathing hard when she reached the yard. A light was on in the stables. Someone was mucking out, metal tines scraping the ground. The raking stopped. She didn't hear footsteps until they were very close.
Oh, Louise, thanks for that. And what a great place to start indeed. A donkey occupying the show house of a ghost estate. The house has been ransacked. I love that bit where you said the fume of shit hitting the wall. Sarah, the woman in this story, she stays on in what you describe as the housing estate that her husband had thrown up and abandoned her to. It's a disquieting opening, isn't it, Louise, that really sets us off as readers on a journey through stories that are disquieting. I mean, there's betrayal, there's toxic marriages, there's wounded lives, there's loads of secrets and violence. but they're never melodramatic. And I felt as a reader, they're so grounded in ordinary life. And I read somewhere that you said it was hunter-gatherers as a story that you felt when you'd written it, I'm getting somewhere here now on place. And was that kind of the moment where you thought, okay, I think now I can continue on and maybe, it's called hunter-gatherers, but maybe gather together a collection of stories?
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much that I thought that I would end up with a collection, but I thought that if I managed to definitely with hunter gatherers, even in the first draft, I could see that something had happened that I hadn't managed to pull off in previous stories. I think that I maybe settled on a tone in the opening lines and managed to kind of hold my nerve with that, which I hadn't managed to do before. I started to write in 2014. And I think I wrote Hunter Gatherers in early 2016.
Right.
So I had written some stories, maybe 5 or 6 stories, and they were probably competent in terms of like narrative arc, that kind of thing. But I didn't really feel that I'd hit on any sort of emotional truth. And I didn't think that I'd got any of the other elements, to work very effectively for me. So I just, really I felt as I was writing that I was like plodding from scene to scene or something. But with hunter gatherers, I think tone is really important in short stories, because that does convey a feeling. And really, if you've only got 8 or 10 pages, sometimes, a lot of stories are as short as that. I mean, not mine necessarily, but I guess a 2,500 word short story, what's that, about 12 pages or something?
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of space. So really there's a feeling or something that you're going for, or some sort of an emotional truth. And I think the tone really helps with that. And then I think maybe something that happens with not just setting, but place. And I think, I really, in the subsequent stories that I attempted then, I really tried to pay attention to those elements.
Yeah, it's brilliant that it all came together, that sense of tone, voice as well, and place. And we had Una Mannion on recently, and she was raving about your book. And I think her book, The Crooked Tree, is one of my favourites as well from this year. But the two of you are best buddies, I think. I hope
we are.
And,
I asked her permission actually for another event. So I was like, I was asked who my best friend was, and I asked Una, and she said it's fine to say that she is my best friend. So
well, that's okay then. We're all okay there. But I like that story that she started out. She kind of dragged you along, didn't she, to the Sandy Bay Writers Group? I think it was Brian Layden was running it, was he?
So that was so Una had and a friend of hers, Rose Jordan, had decided to set up a writing group, and I knew Una a little, probably for 20 years, but we wouldn't have been close friends or anything. But it was another friend, Niamh McCabe, who's a great writer actually, who had been asked to join the group, and she asked me to come along. So for the first few months, maybe 5 or 6 months, Brian Layden facilitated it. We used to meet every night in a room in Sligo IT. So Una, I think really it was sort of funny because there were 8 of us in the room, and on the first night, we drew up a kind of a rota, and the plan was that every week someone would submit around 2,000 words of a short story, and Una was first to submit. And I just remember being completely blown away by her story and thinking, I probably wanted to, I didn't equip myself very well at the first meeting because, really, I had no intention of writing ever. And I just sounded like an idiot when I was asked why I was there. I said, because Niamh made me come, kind of thing. But I think after that, I must have been curious because I was keen to go back, and I probably wanted approval or sort of validation from everyone, but I really wanted to like my work. So I think we were sort of started to share work really quickly, and I still talk to her every day, and sometimes we show each other emails and stuff before we send them. So it's funny.
Yeah, but it is great though to have a writing colleague nearly, isn't it? Somebody you can try work out with, and just for them to say, it's not good or it's working or it's on the way. I don't know what they're pushing in the water down in Sligo. The three of you there, like Una Mannion, yourself, and Niamh McCabe, who I agree is a really fine writer.
Yeah, and Alice Lyons.
That's right.
Well. She's another writing buddy. Yeah, it's gas.
And also, Peter and myself would have remembered years back, like Dermot Healy and Owen McNamee and Molly McCluskey. Leland Bardwell. It's a great spot for writers. I think writing and reading, they go hand in hand as well. And I just think from reading your work, I'm thinking this is a really good reader as well. It was really of interest to me to read somewhere that you said as a child that you loved Carrie's War by Nina Bowden. And that's, yeah, so did I actually. Dark story set in World War II where the kids are sent down to the country. And I thought then, that makes sense because there is a darkness to your work as well. So I just wanted to ask you then about reading and, like your favourites. Whereas the people like Chekhov, did the Russians influence you on the short story, or was it any particular writers that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the ones who. So I always read short stories, before I ever had a notion of writing anything. And I suppose the short story collections that I read and that would have been really important to me would have been, I really, really adore Anne Devlin's collection, The Waypaver. It was published by Faber in the mid 80s,
Oh,
I
right.
think. And then Isabel Allende's collection, The Stories of Eva Luna. I adored that book. Then there's an American writer called Ellen Gilchrist. She's from Louisiana. And I devoured everything by her I could get my hands on. I mean, she's written some quite short novels, but several collections of short stories. So I guess those would have been the ones that were really important to me. Yeah, and I mean, I think maybe when I was about 15 or 16, someone gave me a copy of First Love by. I mean, it's not really a short story, but is it a novella? Is it Turgenev or Turgenev? A little slim book. Yeah, I adored that as well. So, yeah.
That's right. I know that book. It's a tiny little thing. Yeah. So I do think it definitely, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, don't they? But speaking about reading, the Danish writer Dorth Nors, she's written about the invisibility of older women and the obsession with young debut writers. And then I'm thinking of you, and I'm thinking so many well-known female writers began to publish on later on in life. Like, I mean, even George Eliot, she started at 40. You got Isaac Dinesen. She wrote Out of Africa when she was 49. Penelope Fitzgerald, I love her work. She was 60 when she started. And in Ireland now we have debut novels coming from Una Mannion, Danielle McLaughlin. We have, writers such as yourself. Do you think it's refreshing that this is happening?
Yeah, I think it is. And it's sort of funny because, there are these prizes and lists and stuff. The lists don't bother me so much, but I think the prizes do bother me, where they come up with, writers under 40 or writers under 30 or something. And but I think the prizes, there are lots of reasons why women don't get to write until much later. I know myself from facilitating workshops and stuff that a lot of women struggle with not just time, but with entitlement. That they think, why should I be doing that? That they're not entitled to do it somehow. But when it came to my work being out on submission, I spoke to about there was an auction involving quite a few publishers, and I spoke to 9 of them or something, and over the phone, and not one of them seemed to think it was a problem that I was older. So I think that's where I don't really understand why there's this sort of emphasis on younger writers, all this fuss around it, because definitely, all of the publishers I spoke to seemed to be kind of thrilled that I was older.
I think it's exciting because the experience and the wisdom of older women and the reading, if you've been reading, I think that all adds up, life experience and everything.
Absolutely.
And I think it kind of makes sense that the work you're reading then would be more interesting and more richly textured and layered. So I think that's great. I think to just get back to the stories again, you are great at capturing the tenderness of being hurt, particularly women being hurt by the actions of men. And I'm thinking of a story like Imbolc, where Elaine suspects, I don't want to give away too much, but her husband is basically betraying her or having it off with a young one. But then on the other hand, there is also the caring nature of the father in Wolf Point, a story that I really loved because I thought it was quiet, it was heartbreaking. The father minding his young daughter while the woman is at home and she's seriously depressed. So I was wondering about that balancing of the lives of men and women. Did you think that was hard to achieve, or is it just you're just writing things that come to you?
No, yeah. But I was writing things that I suppose I just wrote what came to me. And in 1 or 2 reviews, people said that all of the men were terrible. And I find that kind of annoying because I don't think they are all terrible. I mean, even Liam in Bullock, who's not behaving himself very well, maybe a year earlier, he wouldn't have behaved like that. So, and I suppose, short stories are a form of drama. So, there wouldn't be much, I don't know. I mean, who'd want to read something where they sit down and have like this sort of delightful lunch, and then he goes up to the lambing shed and doesn't have it off with the young one.
I know, that's true.
So, yeah, and I think as well,
It doesn't have it off. Yeah, I know,
yeah,
it's true.
I think some men are kind of interested in fatherhood, or interested as fathers. I think there are men who are great fathers and terrible partners.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's true. Happy events don't make for good stories. That's true. Now, Louise, you have been just listening to you there with all the action that's been going on. You've been really busy in lockdown. You've been not only getting your stories ready for publication, but you also finished, you're finishing a debut novel. It's set in the Troubles. That's soon to be published by Bloomsbury. And you were doing a PhD. Was the PhD in writing, Louise?
Yeah, so I did an MA creative writing in kind of 2015, 2016 in Queen's. And then straight away, I really, really loved being in Queen's again because I'm from the north. I mean, I guess in a way, just, going to Belfast for a couple of days a week, it really felt like going home to an extent. Straight away then started a PhD. So that was in creative writing as well. Some of it was, a few of the stories that are in the book were part of the PhD. But there was also a critical component, and I did that on Nora Holt, the writer Nora Holt. Yeah. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know who she is, she was an Irish writer who lived from 1898 until 1984. She published 28 books, but I came across her. I mean, she was virtually out of print. I came across her because Sinead Gleeson had included one of her stories in The Long Gaze Back. And I just thought the story was amazing. And I also couldn't believe that she had vanished, virtually vanished. So, yeah, that was great. So I the critical element was that I, attempted to construct some sort of biography because there was very little known about her life. And then I also focused on her 3 collections of short stories.
That's brilliant to have both. I mean, I did one in Lancaster, actually, and it's good to have the critical element as well going, because it feeds into the writing as well, I think, especially with such a fine writer as Nora Holt.
Yeah.
Your stories are so supple in their use of language. They seem to me seamlessly crafted. Do you think, having done your PhD in writing, do you think that writing can be learnt?
I mean, I think that it can be improved. Definitely, I think it can be improved. But I don't know. Yeah, that's a really hard question because I spoke to somebody about this the other day, and this is somebody who teaches writing and maintains that it can't be taught. And not everybody is he thinks that not everybody is a writer. And I think there's an element of that. But I think that people can learn anybody can learn storytelling, really. So I don't know. But just with I suppose from the very start, because I felt not confident at all, that from the very beginning, I put a lot of time into editing. And that was just something that I did myself. And I suppose, what writing programs and stuff give you is deadlines and feedback. And if you're prepared to take that feedback, then definitely I think the work will improve.
Yeah, I think that is good. I was listening to Martine Evans, the poet, speaking recently at her launch, and she said that she writes fast and edits slow. That's what she does. So I suppose everyone has different approaches, but it is good to have somebody at the side, I think, guiding you along. Now, Louise, you grew up in the north, and one of the outstanding stories, I think, actually, in this collection has at its core, the Troubles, and it's called In Silhouette, and it kind of moves between the north and London, and it spans decades from the early 80s onwards, and the narrator is haunted by a murder, which I don't want to give away, but it is connected with her brother. And I thought the structure in this story, it's so tight. It seems nobody is innocent. There's a lot of guilt there. So I was wondering, just I think we might finish up now. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you.
Thank you so
and
much.
Congratulations and the best of luck with this book. I'm going to be sending this book out to all my friends because I really think it's excellent. Yeah, I think actually the thing about good short stories is that they stay with you, and I think these stories do stay with me. So I think that's brilliant. But could you lead us into In Silhouette, and then maybe we'll hear your supple and richly textured writing again, Louise.
Okay. So In Silhouette, the opening scene unfolds, I suppose it's about 1978, and it's where a teenage girl, late teens, is getting ready for a night out, and she lives in some fairly drab farming community near the border, so she's getting dolled up to go and meet her friends in the local pub for a drink. And I suppose that night things happened that changed the course of her life. And I suppose what I was really trying to get at is that I think for a lot of people, and their experience of the the Troubles is it was almost like an indirect thing, you know. I think there was nobody who wasn't affected by it, but I think I was just interested in the idea that without actually doing anything, that your life could be ruined, I suppose. Anyway, start reading. The hot pants look trampy with the platforms, so you change into your yellow parallels. You pack your clutch bag with fags, a pat of powder, a tin of Vaseline. It's floppy, so you wad it with tissues to fill it out. The bag came free with a bottle of Charlie perfume you bought in the chemist shop you're not allowed to go into because Mr. Crawford, the owner, is in the DUP. A last look in the mirror. The broderie anglaise trim on your top doesn't quite reach the waistband of your trousers. Your stomach is hollow, which you like, and pale, which you don't. You go down the stairs and put your head into the sitting room. Shawaddy Waddy are on Seaside Special, wearing suits the same shade as your trousers. Cheerio, you say. Your mother pulls the edges of her cardigan together by way of an answer. You go down the driveway. The wee ones are at the stream, building a dam or demolishing one, their shrieks blowing across the fields to you. The heat has been building all day. The tarmac is spongy under your feet, sundering into oil and chips of stone, and by the time you get to the halfway in, the cork soles on your shoes are greasy looking and the hair at the back of your neck is wet. The front door is wedged open with a brick. The girls are already there, at the corner table by the jukebox, nursing jewel-coloured drinks laced with cordial. Gin and orange, Pernod and blackcurrant, vodka and lime. You tuck your clutch high up under your arm and go to the bar.
Oh, Louise, well done. And also, I was just listening there thinking as well that this story is written in the present tense from a second person point of view, which is an extraordinary feat. Well done. So many thanks to Louise Kennedy for reading from.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. It's been brilliant to have you. Short and sweet, but we packed a good bit of in there, Louise. So thanks very much. So The End of the World, it's published by Bloomsbury. Lots of luck to you, Louise, for your forthcoming novel as well. This The End of the World is Cul-de-sac is a must-buy book, and I highly recommend. And as usual, all details will be available on Books for Breakfast, www.booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And thanks for listening.
Our Toaster Challenge guest this morning is Penelope Shuttle. Penelope Shuttle has lived in Cornwall since 1970 and is the widow of the poet Peter Redgrove. She's an adventurous and wide-ranging poet, praised for her spare style. The poems are very close, I think, to song. They're open-ended, often incantatory, drawn to extended sequences, notably in Missing You, her lament for Peter Redgrove, and now in her new extended sequence, Leoness, which we'll talk about. But just to give a bit of history, first of all, her first collection of poems, The Orchard Upstairs, was followed by 6 other books from Oxford University Press: The Child Stealer, The Lion from Rio, Adventures with My Horse, Taxing the Rain, Building a City for Jamie, and Selected Poems 1980 to 1996. And then a leaf out of his book from Oxford Poets and Redgrove's Wife, and Sandgrain and Hourglass from Blood Axe Books. That collection, Redgrove's Wife, was shortlisted for both the Forward Prize and the T.S. Eliot Prize in 2006. Sandgrain and Hourglass was a Poetry Book Society recommendation, and her retrospective, Unsent, New and Selected Poems, drew on 10 collections published over 3 decades, plus that title collection, Unsent. Her later collections from Blood Axe are Will You Walk a Little Faster, and now Leoness, which is out in June, just now. It's interesting as well that Penelope Shuttle was actually first published as a novelist, and she's published several works of fiction, including All the Usual Hours of Sleeping, Wailing Monkey Embracing a Tree, and Rain Splitter in the Zodiac Garden. And with Peter Redgrove, she was the co-author of The Wise Wound, Menstruation in Every Woman, and Alchemy for Women, Personal Transformation Through Dreams and the Female Cycle, as well as a collection of poems, The Hermaphrodite Album, and 2 novels, The Terrors of Dr. Treviles, a romance, and The Glass Cottage, a nautical romance in 1976. Her work has been widely anthologized, can be heard on the Poetry Archive website. Her poetry has been broadcast frequently on BBC Radio 3 and 4, her poem Outgrown was used recently in a radio and television commercial. So she's been a judge of many poetry competitions, is a Hawthornden Fellow and a tutor for the Poetry School, and is currently chair of the Falmouth Poetry Group, which is one of the longest running poetry workshops in the UK. And she joins me now from Falmouth in Cornwall. That's a dauntingly impressive CV, Penelope. So I just say that and you're very welcome to Books for Breakfast. The new book that we're here to talk about is called Lyonesse. I mean, it's a very evocative place name that might be familiar to people from Arthurian mythology, this kind of legendary kingdom of a long kind of strand of land that stretches from Land's End to what is now, I suppose, the Isles of Scilly, and in that Celtic Sea portion of the Atlantic Ocean. Or people might know it from Thomas Hardy, when I set out for Lyonesse and so on. But I just wonder, I mean, what exactly does Lyonesse mean to you? And can you tell us about this book and how you came to write it and what Lyonesse meant kind of in the beginning to you and as the sequence developed?
Well, Peter, like quite a lot of my work, it happened accidentally, without planning. I was actually attending a workshop. It was in January 2015, run by Katrina Naomi, and she gave a wonderful workshop, and she gave each of us a slip of paper with a hidden message for a prompt for writing on it. Now, I had just finished my previous collection, Will You Walk a Little Faster, which focuses quite a lot on walking around cities, specifically London and Bristol. So I had written a lot about cities. And so I opened this slip of paper and it says, write about a city. And of course, it was a completely random handout. Katrina wasn't persecuting me. It was simply that, and I looked at it and I thought, blimey, cities again. And I was really discombobulated. Everyone else starts writing away. And I just went out. There were beautiful gardens where we were in an annex of the cafe. So I went out into the gardens, which we always said to participants, if you want to wander around the gardens and write. I went outside into the drizzle. I thought, what on earth have I got left to say about cities? Nothing. And I sat down, beautiful gardens looking over the Helford River, and this first line came out of nowhere. The gown shops of Lyonesse took satin for granted. Out of nowhere, except my slight rage at being given a city to write about. But it was one of those things, when you do get these messages for writing, and it came in with a message that says, listen to me. And so I sat there and I wrote the first draft of a poem called The Gown Shops. And then I went home and I wrote quite a lot of poems around the theme of Lyonesse, which I would never have chosen, because if you live in Cornwall, it comes fully packaged as a tourist attraction. So it's a big cliche. So this is something, if you live in Cornwall, you would basically avoid. But the first poem didn't allow me to avoid it. And then when something comes to you, you have to sort of dig right down into it. And as the poems came, the drafts, and I dug down into it, I realised that Lyonesse was a kind of lost paradise, and that it was actually standing for earlier parts of my life, when Peter and I were going around, travelling, writing, when we had a very innate companionship that I sort of then ended when Peter died. And I realised it was a way of thinking about loss, but also I became aware too that as the actual geographical event that submerged the far region of Cornwall was from a Bronze Age inundation event. It was a climate change event, probably a series of storms, but obviously that's in the face of possible extinction. That's another subject. And I had to kind of negotiate a personal relationship with that, so that I wasn't jumping on a bandwagon, but obviously that came into it and wove its way through.
And we'll come back to that because I'm very interested in that bit. But I love how you say that. I mean, the first line that came into your head out of nowhere, and it is, the gown shops of Lyonesse took satin for granted. I mean, it's a great line. It's full of mystery, and yet it's very kind of particular. I mean, gown shops and satin. I mean, and I'm interested in the idea that this was what set the whole thing in motion. I mean, it's kind of often the way it happens. There's a trigger.
It is.
And then something happens. I mean, and maybe you might actually read, because I'd love people to hear
sure.
that poem. And we can talk about how you kind of developed the sequence from that.
The gown shops. The gown shops of Lyonesse took satin for granted. Silk was cheaper than salt, but velvet rip-roared like the water lions of the West who dealt the city its fate. Those frocks wore themselves to rags overnight, along streets pinned to the tides, gardens groomed by the waves. When the weather forgot its place in Lyonesse, every dress was a flounce in the wrong direction in all the bars and ballrooms as the city swam for its life. And in the last wet mirror Lyonesse held up to itself, not a gown to be seen, nor a child, if tempest truth be told, in the place where Lyonesse had been.
That's great. I mean, you can kind of see, I mean, and hear how that would be the start of a big adventure. I mean, that sense of a fully kind of realized other world, you know, the satin, the silk, the weather forgetting its place, the flouncing in the wrong direction. So we're in a world which is sort of familiar, but it's also deeply kind of strange. I mean, it's a world that has its own rules. It's a world that's both there and not there. And it seems to kind of almost disappear at the end. It kind of comes in and out of focus. It kind of you know, and you have that kind of sense throughout. It's a very particular place, but it's a place with its own rules as well.
Yeah, that was kind of a given as the first poems came. But I think because there are dress shops and bars and ballrooms, it gives actuality to the place, and so that kind of gave me a marker to describe it as a real place. And in fact, as you get deeper and deeper into a theme, I began to look at other sunken cities. And I think it was on Channel 5, one of those documentaries that explain things very, very, very slowly, several times over. And they focused on the sunken city of Baiae, which was Nero's version of Las Vegas. It was a city on the coast down from Rome, which fell into the sea. And in this documentary, you saw the most beautiful statues being brought up and the temples and so on. And so that kind of, again, was another marker of the actuality of these cities, the life that was there, people just like us.
So you have that kind of, I suppose you have the actual kind of historical kind of or geographical kind of inundation of the part of the world where you live, kind of in the Bronze Age, and then you have this kind of notion of Atlantis coming in there, and the notion of these sunken cities. I know you went to an exhibition in the British Museum, and that played a role too, didn't it?
It did. That made a huge impact on me. These were cities on the Nile, Canopus and Thonis Heracleion, and they were built effectively on sand, and over the years they just sank down. But they were also cities that, in the pre-Christian era, the records seem to show that they were very tolerant of all religions. Lots of different religions lived there, and they were huge trading cities for Egypt. But when they were Christianized, the Christianized population, probably with some encouragement from the church, threw many of their beautiful pagan anyway, statues into the sea before the cities actually fell. So they gave up part of their identity already when they were Christianized. So that was quite an interesting nexus of how a city kind of destroys itself before the weather destroys it and the ground falls beneath it.
But it's part of what it's part of what you call, I suppose, the universality of loss. I mean, that kind of, the physical cities, but also it's because it's our human experience, isn't it? I mean, we're here and then we're erased from the record, isn't it? I mean, that's very much kind of part of what's happening in the poems, I think, as well. I mean, you because you said that at one point, you said that Lyonesse offers me new ways to write about loss.
Well, I've written quite a number of poems and collections that have focused on bereavement. You mentioned the sequence Missing You, which came out in Redgrove's Wife. And you kind of have to shift your perspective. I feel that people who are kind enough to read me have heard enough about me very specifically talking about either Peter, and shortly after, a few years after that, I lost a very, very close friend. We'd both had children in the same year in 1976 and gone through all of the child rearing, supporting one another, and that was a loss. And once the Leoness came, out of left field, and I began to think, well, what is it that has drawn me so deeply? Sorry, my ears are grotesquely small. What has drawn me to it? And it was writing about loss, not my specific ones, but loss is what everyone experiences. And so to do loss through cities just became part of the atmosphere I was writing in.
And too, I mean, obviously the sea is everywhere. I mean the tang of it, the feel of it, the ships, the sailors, the piratical sounding voices that kind of come in now and then. So it's the fruit of also it's a very coastal sort of imagination. I mean, the sea and its rhythms I know are very important to you, and I suppose that's one of the things that Falmouth must give you.
I think this is again another way of writing about something that you're not specifically putting yourself at the centre of. It's not like my poems about Cornwall, but it is very much my experience of living since I was 22 in this maritime climate and atmosphere.
Yes.
And also I think there's something atavistic going on because my mother's family came from coastal Essex and the guys were all seafaring guys. They either crewed for the Americas yachts or they were in the merchant navy. And I sometimes think that nautical thing must be buried somewhere down in my genes. Yeah. And I kind of reconnected with that.
Sure.
So again, it's writing about kind of writing new ways without putting myself centrally at it. I put Leoness in the place where normally perhaps I would be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this might be actually a good place to read another poem from it. Make a Wish.
Make a wish. The sky has no favourites in Leoness, but favours all with its fair or foul. Leoness will always be just what you want it to be. Streets paved with the sea, days of dogfish and dolphin, the swordfish patrolling aisle and pew, knights learning their place in rock pool after rock pool. Leoness offers you what can't be given or taken, bought or sold. Here you can have everything you wish for and wish it away as Leoness goes down in the sigh of the last ship.
Yeah, I love those. I'm intrigued by those lines. Leoness offers you what can't be given or taken, or you must forget everything. That notion of, you must forget everything, sang Leoness, everything but down here as well. And I suppose that kind of touches on the real nature of Leoness, that it's a place for the imagination to run freely, that it's...
I think it is kind of in the threshold area between our daily world and our unconscious. The sea is a huge element in our individual unconscious processes, our dreams, and also in the collective unconscious. And if you go right back, and it's kind of a cliche, but to say we all came from the sea long ago. But I think in these lines, I'm really, in a way, thinking about how we work with the imagination, because you cannot force the imagination. You have to be in the slipstream of it. You can't take from it, and it won't necessarily give to you. And it will just give you everything, and it will take it away. And then it's also, in a wider sense, it's also fate, which gives you something in your life, and then takes it away. So it's quite a lot to do with kind of just processes of actually how we think about how we live, I suppose. and about the spontaneity of writing, because sometimes people do say to me, "Where do you get your ideas from? And what is your strategy?" To which I have to say, I don't actually have one. I'm just kind of here, with the antennae out, waiting.
Yeah, the antennae are important.
Yes,
I think because it's full of. I mean, it's full of all kinds of things that really kind of struck me. I mean, the images that kept pulling me into sort of the immersiveness or the immersive reality of it. I mean, there was an image of fish swimming through the branches of the forest, for instance, in Our Cradle Sea, or there was the girls named after the boats instead of the other way around.
The girls named after the boats is from coastal Essex. My mother told me
Okay.
once, talking about her family, that the fishing boats would be named after people, girls in the family. And I had an aunt, my mother's elder sister, whose name was Wavelet, Lettee, which is a coastal Essex name from the past, but it was to do with the boat.
The boat, yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
daughter.
Yeah,
and I don't know whether it was that kind of a good luck thing, or just they thought, well, we'll use the same name for both.
I love that, yeah.
So things sometimes in poems, Peter, that look as if they're an imagined thing,
Yeah.
are very much got their roots in a real
Yeah.
happening, a situation.
Yeah. It's also coming. I mean, Lyonesse is also it's a place for lovers as well. I mean, very much like its patron saint is Valentine, and it's close to my own heart as well, because Valentine's heart is housed just down the road from us here in Dublin in Whitefriars Street Church. Now, I mean, he might have had a big heart because
is it? Oh,
I think there are bits of it around in churches around the world, but supposedly,
yeah, his skull is in Rome. I've seen it in Rome.
But we have his heart apparently. But
how lovely! Didn't he travel though?
Yeah.
What a traveller!
Maybe,
He went to Lyonesse. Yeah.
Lyonesse can't get used to the dark. You think there'd be a switch, a candle, a match. These are kind of some random lines that really I really kind of felt drawn to. That was from In the Dark, or Lyonesse is a blind alley where I forget what hangs my bones together. That was in May the Holy Ghost blow your sailboat home. And sort of, I don't know, forgetting and memory are both important, aren't they?
They are. I think that's definitely looking back in the time after bereavement, when everything's dark. Yes, so there are memories there of the bereavement. But as I said, I didn't want to put it centrally with me. I wanted to set it in Lyonesse, as I'd been given Lyonesse. It seemed a way forward.
There are some lines too. I mean, I love the lines about the devil being an Englishman. And you have
that comes from a Cornish tale. Yes, well, they would, you see. It would be an Englishman.
He would be, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
I think you're going to read that for us, actually.
I will. The devil. In Lyonesse, the devil is still an Englishman, speaking English to all his Luciferian angels, and not some skanky language fit only for lions. As the bards frown in Cornish, and the sailors off Land's End draw up nets crammed with old doors, casements and porches, from the place they call the town. I've seen for myself a Lyonesse made of ice and air and sunshine, conjured on a blue winter sea in Falmouth Bay. Polychrome towers, medallioned piers, portals, spires and porticos, columns mimicking trees and branches, hierophantic clusters of maypole belfries, courtier-like and gaudy for God. All the ruthless architectural audacity and curvaceous elaboration of the Sagrada Familia, but it was the devil's weatherwork, conjuring up a ghost city from the last glacial maximum, lost lunoir, gone again in an hour.
Penelope, like with a subject like this, I mean, do you have a strong sense of, a Cornish identity that's distinct from an English one, and how would you sort of define that? I mean, I'm thinking because there's often a sense of conflict between, you read about conflicts between permanent residents and incomers, or blow-ins as they get called in Ireland. So I'm just wondering about that. I mean, that's been in the news again sort of recently, but is there a sense of that kind of distinction between, I suppose, people in Cornwall, and is England somehow an other, or?
It's a hugely complicated issue. When my daughter was at school in the 80s, and this was at junior school, she once casually remarked that all the Cornish kids played together, and all the kids who'd come down, families had moved for work and whatever, played a bit separately, though there were moments where they crossed over. She was very friendly with two little Cornish girls who are also Jehovah's Witnesses. So I think that just shows how complex the Jehovah's Witness family were very Cornish, and yet there were separations and little kids sorting out who they are. Am I Cornish? Am I English? But it seemed to be, it was out aggro. It was just the children knew there was some cultural differences. So that's going back there. But I mean, now, we've got the G7 coming in here for the weekend in St Ives, the weekend of the 11th to the 13th. In Falmouth, we're now currently basically a police state. So we've had our car parks closed. There are some roads where cars may not stop at all. We've got, in St Ives, they've covered over all the drains so that people can't put poison down them. We have dedicated protest areas. Now, obviously, I wasn't born in Cornwall, but I've been here so long, I'm very adopted to it. And I can't tell you that people in Cornwall are not happy about the G7. And it's a perfect example of the exploitation that happens to Cornwall. And, of course, the other exploitation, don't get me started, second homes. We have a huge amount of second homes. And the Falmouth I moved to, which was quite small and actually quite run down, I mean, and the social deprivation that goes on in Cornwall, particularly around post-mining areas, people know nothing about. And then to add to the annoyance, Peter, Cornwall voted for Brexit, and they lost millions and millions and millions of pounds of what's called Objective 1 funding, because Cornwall was regarded as an area of serious economic decline, along with some Eastern European areas. And the British government have replaced these millions with 1 million. You know, we're a bit beleaguered, I'd say.
We better not go there, or we could be here a long time. But let me go back, Penelope. Let me go back to the book because it's unusual in lots of ways. I mean, first of all, what's interesting to me is it's effectively two books in one. I mean, there's Leoness and there's the second part, New Lamps for Old. And I mean, it comes in at 150 pages. I mean, I have to say it's refreshing to see a publisher undertake a large volume like this. You know, and I also liked it. I find it interesting to see people writing in the longer forms. I mean, you mentioned Missing You, which was an extended lament for Peter Redgrove. And, you know, the effect of that is greatly enhanced, I think, when you get the interdependency of the poems, you get the flow and the pacing. And likewise in Leoness, I mean, I think the success comes from that sort of sense of an extended flow and poems kind of talking to each other and bouncing off each other and all of that. But I'm wondering, I mean, did the second section, which is called New Lamps for Old, did that come after Leoness? Were you kind of specifically writing it kind of against that, or were you saying, okay, I've done this, now I'm going to do a very different kind of thing, or again?
They kind of interwove after because I wrote the Leoness from 2015 and it went to the publisher in February 2019. And about halfway through, so let's say about 2017, I was completely inundated with the Leoness poems to the point that this is now overwhelming. So I had times when I wrote something completely other. And again, it was not a planned strategy. It was something I just needed to do. And I suppose because Leoness working about different ways of writing about loss, it did send me back to writing more directly. This is me writing about losses. And the New Lamps for Old is a title I've had for a long time. It was a poem published years ago, and it is set in Cornwall because there are cliffs in it. And I knew that I wanted to expand that more, but sometimes it isn't given to you, or you can't take it. You have to wait until even a phrase reveals what was packed into it. And perhaps through writing quite a number of the Leoness poems and being moved on with the imagination there, that I realised that New Lamps for Old did mean the new life I've had since bereavement. There's a long passageway out, and all of the illumination you have of a life when you're with a life companion. We were both poets. I mean, you have to be very careful not to look back at the past with rose-coloured spectacles, but we did have wonderful times. And so that illumination is the old lamps that life was with Peter's death and also with ageing. That had changed. But The new lamp, I suppose, in a way, was Lyonesse, that shone onto the imagination and enabled me. And again, you're talking about sequences. In the new lamps for old, I've included a sequence that was written at Swarthmore Hall, the Quaker retreat centre. It was a very famous house in Quakerism up in Ulverston. And that I wrote a series of poems there that were around an anniversary of Peter's death in June. And so that again was finding what illumination is there in my life now. Because I live alone. I mean, I'm very close to my brother and to my daughter, and I have good friends, but I'm on my own a lot of the time. So it's up to me to illuminate that life. And obviously, if you're a poet, that's where you go to for illumination. So,
Sure. I mean, this is just a bit of serendipity, but there was something. You have a lovely poem in this Kandinsky at the Tate, and where you're swimming through Kandinsky, and Tate lifeguards sit on a high black observation stool. But it actually put me in mind of one of my favorite of Peter Redgrove's poems, and it's called "Dipping into the Tate." And it's funny because I had these lines. I had been looking at them as with the bucket, dipping into the Tate, as with the bucket of oneself into a well of colour and odour, to smell the pictures, to sniff up the odours of the colours, which are the fragrance of people excited by the pictures. That was a poem he wrote called "Into the Rothko Installation." Yeah, isn't it? And I'm thinking, like your poetries are obviously different, but they share, I think, certain fundamental kind of, I don't know, excitement or a sense of spiritual quest.
We did share that, and also we shared, because I can't paint at all, but we're in Cornwall, which is a painter's county, and we've got our own Tate, and so, and years ago we used to go to the Tate a lot, so kind of that was part of our life as two people together. And I'm sure that those lines were playing away in the background, and I wrote that poem. Yeah.
We might ask you to read, because I know you have the final poem that you're going to read for us is from that section, New Lamps for Old, and it's called Other Elements.
I can't say my life anymore. Instead, I say the sun took me along the way in an air orient. I was taken. I won't say my life is like this or like that. I leave it to its fate, the sprite of the moment, putting its mark on me, never to be shifted. Our days of life were days I remember and forget 100 times a day, sweet as old radio tunes heard in the foreign street. Those days came and went. I loved them so. If you think you're forgotten, days, think again. That day has yet to dawn.
That's great. I love those last lines. If you think you've forgotten days, think again. That day has yet to dawn. I love that notion of the persistence of the days of our lives and how they run like a kind of constant stream under our daily life. So that's a good place to end our talk, maybe, and to move you on to the toaster challenge. This is where we give you the length of time that it takes to make a slice of toast, to talk about a book that has meant something to you. So, and then I'll count you in 1, 2, 3, and off you go.
Collected Early Poems, 1940 to 1960, by Denise Levertov. I've been thinking a lot about rereading of late because I am lax about the discipline of rereading. At present, I'm rereading the novels of Muriel Spark, but that's another story. I'm also systematically and chronologically rereading Denise Levertov, whose work I discovered back in 1967 when I was 20, when few role models were available to me as a woman poet. Finding Levertov's poems gave me affirmation, purpose, permission. If our first readings of a key poet are passionate, of falling in love, then rereading is dispassionate, unties knots in the relationship between poet and reader, revitalizes the reading experience. Levertov's early poems reveal a survivor, adaptive to life's challenges. A poet must not break, says Pound. She did not break. As a reader, I'm a goldfish swimming round the bowl of literature. I forget lines, bits of poems, and then the impact of them comes to me brand new as I swim towards them for perhaps the umpteenth time. I'm thrilled to rediscover here very early poems Levertov set in Cornwall, where I've lived since 1970. Here's the beginning of Durgan, which is a creek upriver from my home in Falmouth. At Durgan, waves are black as cypresses, clear as the water of a wishing well, caressing the stones with smooth palms, looking into the pools as enigmatic eyes peer into mirrors. Here's a first sighting of the well, set to reappear in her great 1961 Muse poem of that name, still ahead of me in my rereading pilgrimage. Levertov was born in Ilford in 1923. Of her father, she says, his Hasidic ancestry, his being steeped in Jewish and Christian scholarship and mysticism were factors built into my cells. Being part Jewish, part German, Welsh and English, notes Levertov, lent her a sense of being special rather than being excluded. In 1947, she married the American writer Mitchell Goodman and moved to the States. The American vernacular gave her a conduit for new, revelatory impulses. All at once there's immediacy, vivacity, colloquial openness and tactile daring. To the Snake closes the volume, combining myth and reality, sexuality and the spirit in an intense summoning and relinquishing of a totem creature. Levertov's fidelity to the imagination has been and remains priceless treasure to me. Green snake, when I hung you round my neck and stroked your cold, pulsing throat as you hissed to me, glinting arrowy scales, and I felt the weight of you on my shoulders, and the whispering silver of your dryness sounded close at my ears. Green snake, I swore to my companions that certainly you were harmless. But truly, I had no certainty and no hope, only desiring to hold you for that joy which left a long wake of pleasure as the leaves moved and you faded into the pattern of grass and shadows, and I returned, smiling and haunted, to a dark morning.
That's great. That was Penelope Shuttle talking about collected earlier poems, 1940 to 1960, by Denise Levertov. And she was also talking about her own book, Leoness, which is published by Blood Axe Books and is available now.
I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley and I have Peter Sirr here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And yeah, so
we'll be back again next Thursday morning. We'll have the toast on, we'll have the kettle boiling, we will have more books to discuss, and we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.